Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Warrant Committee tonight. We're going to start with approval of minutes, and then we have two presentations of budgets, and we'll be discussing the cemetery budget. Thank you, Therese, for coming in tonight. And then also Parks and Rec, David Perdiosa will be coming in a little bit later. I have a few announcements about special town meeting next week, and we'll talk about the schedule. Anything else that we need to do tonight? No, great. Well, may I have a motion on the minutes, Steve?
Move the minutes of January 25th and 27th.
As written?
As written.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Great. Well, Therese, thanks so much again for coming in. It's my second time seeing you. I think everybody here actually may have been here last year for your presentation, now that I look around the table.
Oh, I didn't change it too much. So.
We have a new member who isn't here just yet, but thanks again. Nice to see you. And she wants to start with a couple of opening slides, and if you want to just tell Ted to go on to the next slide, he'll advance it for you. But we would love to hear a little bit more about the cemetery.
Okay, the PowerPoint presentation is more or less put together just to give you a general idea of what the cemetery business is all about, and our particular cemetery, which is a historical garden cemetery established in 1672. Our priority, of course, is to provide service to families, and every interment is handled with the utmost respect, and our grounds are maintained to provide a place of beauty, honor, and comfort. And part of our job is to provide guidance to families from choosing a grave to choosing a memorial and beyond. Our grounds, again, as I said, are maintained at a high level of care because it's required by the people who visit the cemetery and the people who have their loved ones buried there. Groundskeeping, garden planning, section layout, they're all done to complement the historic landscape and to stay in character with the original intent of the landscape architects who designed it in the mid-19th century. The mid-19th century garden cemetery movement was quite prevalent. Before the advent of parks, cemeteries were the place to go on weekends where people would picnic and stroll and enjoy passive recreation. So they predate the park in America. The town of Milton was fortunate that the town fathers decided to hire preeminent landscape designers of the time, Copeland and Cleveland, who had also submitted a design for Central Park, but Frederick Law Olmsted was chosen instead. The cemetery, as you know, it has a lot of trees, it has a pond, it has curvilinear roadways, and when we develop new sections, we try to keep that character and try to keep the same character. Garden cemeteries or rural cemeteries, as I said, predate the development of parks, and the most notable ones in this area are Mount Auburn, Forest Hills, and Sleepy Hollow, and Milton Cemetery, which is the oldest municipal garden cemetery in the state. That's the aerial view of Milton Cemetery, and if you can make out the roadways, you could see that we are getting out to the corners of the land, and the land that is left to develop is impacted by wetlands and ledge. It was the most difficult land to develop, and that's why it hasn't been done. So that's what we're left with. So the next slide, the trustees and I are now aiming for acquisition and development of any spaces that remain possible to develop in the cemetery, and acquiring any lands that may be contiguous and may become available so that we could expand the life of the cemetery. That will require funding both for development and acquisition, and so at this point, we're in the planning stages. I think you might have heard that we stopped selling graves except for at need since about a year ago, because we wanted to preserve the graves that we have presently laid out for the people who need them. And I think that may be lifted in the springtime because we have a new section laid out now. So when we do develop a site, this is an area adjacent to Gordon Road, and you can see the impact of the wetlands, the green area, and the impact of that slope in the front right of the screen, which is all ledge. So that's the kind of space that we have left to develop. And if you go to the next screen, you can see if you are very creative, you can plan for a lot of graves in that small space, dependent upon what kind of buffer zone we have to keep to the wetland. So that's just one section. We have a few that we're planning at this point. In addition to the appropriation that the town annually provides for the operation of the cemetery, we have ongoing fundraising efforts to help beautify the cemetery and to run programs and events that the public have been able to enjoy. The next slide, please. So the fundraising from 1988 to the present, generally, we've raised about $1.3 million from gifts and grants, and most of them were targeted for certain, certain projects that we're working on. And the next slide. I think I showed you this last year. That was another way of raising funds. The Company Men movie was filmed on site. They did a funeral scene at the cemetery, and they gave us $2,000 towards the gift fund to help beautify the cemetery, and that was fun. We haven't had a movie since, but they're scouting us all the time. We just need to raise our price. The preservation plan that was prepared in 2002 was a guide to for preservation of the monuments in the old section, for planting of new signage, and for care of the trees in the old grounds. So we went through the old grounds with an arborist, and I mapped and wrote directions identified and wrote directions and condition analysis for each tree, so that we could keep that as a guide. And in that way, we received a grant from the Department of Environmental Management to do some of that tree work. And we received a grant to analyze the headstones in the old section, which we had site analysis done, and we've had a lot of those repaired since then. Next slide. Signage was part of that grant, and if you come to the front of the cemetery, you'll see several signs in that kind of character, which is similar to the sign that's in front of the town hall, that same kind of style. The building facilities master plan was done to look at the buildings that are currently on site, and a lot of the suggestions that were made and the analysis that was done in that facilities master plan has been completed. Because of the facilities master plan, we applied for a grant to the Copeland Foundation, and after reviewing the plan, they said that they would fund the renovation of the employees' lunchroom in a stone building built in 1929, and convert the stable into our administrative office. And that's the winter view, but looks a lot prettier in the springtime. That's the stable office. The Friends of the Milton Cemetery were established in 2007, and they help support the cemetery by planning events and funding historical walking tours, bird watching tours, and certain renovation projects, such as the renovation of the receiving tomb. You can skip through those. That's Anthony Samarco with one of his historical walking tours. And the receiving tomb, which was built in 1879, was in disrepair, and that's now been repointed, and a new cement floor has been placed in there. That is used occasionally for caskets that can't be buried for some reason, either that there's a problem with the family lot, or it's there's ledge, or some question why this person can't be buried. It's also rented. If someone in Milton dies and they want to be buried up in Maine, we've had people spend the winter in the receiving tomb until the ground would thaw in Maine. The town, through our appropriation, it gave us some additional funding to help repair some of the stones, and we had a workshop last summer that was run by Jonathan Appel, and we restored about 40 gravestones in that 2-day project. It was very helpful. So now all of the people that work there are trained in how to clean and reset and repair broken monuments. The one on the left, that was kind of interesting. We were resetting a monument, and when they dug down to place the monument where it used to be, we found that flat marker, which is a Revolutionary War marker, and it has a bronze insert. I forget the name of the person, but it was under the ground. It was like 4 inches under the soil. So this was an interesting find. The garden portal celebration was another way to bring the public in to enjoy the cemetery. We partnered with the Milton Arts Center, and we had a sketching pastel class around the pond. Milton Academy chipped in with a violinist, and the Milton Jazz Band played at the front gate. And the Copeland Foundation gifted one of the next slide, the Murray Dewart's Golden Gate to the right, to us about a year later. And that's going to be a part of our permanent art. That was the that was the float for the
For a long time.
Permanent acquaintanceship.
Thanks very much.
And the good news is, as far as the budget's concerned, I think you missed the page of how much income that we brought in.
It went by quickly, I think.
Okay.
Was it the revolving fund page, you mean?
It was income fiscal year 15. Oh, you have the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Fundraising.
Yeah, that's
No,
that's
keep
the
going
only-
back. I think it's like the 4th, 5th slide. Okay,
I'm not finding
it's
it.
not there.
I don't think there is,
But,
it
you
was-
know, we can put up the last year's income,
Okay.
okay? And in fact, I can hand it out, too.
Well, we emailed it out, this spreadsheet.
Is this it here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, so it wasn't a clear way on the budget
Go ahead and hand it out.
request to show how much income we made besides revolving funds.
Find it on my phone or something.
Thank you.
Sorry, Teresa, what were you
Oh,
saying?
that's all right. Our income last year was about, what, 840,000? Oh, 833. 833,000, and our expenditures were somewhere like six. It was in the high sixes, I think.
Well, since we're on this page,
Yes, Ted?
yes, your income was 833, but the thing we want to note is how much of this goes to the general fund.
It was the 420,000.
And that's been pretty consistent for the last several years. A little bit above 400,000 a year generated by the cemetery and goes to the local revenue in our fund. This other portion up here goes to their perpetual care fund, so that eventually, when you run out of land, you'll still be able to finance the care of the cemetery.
Correct.
And then the last piece is a revolving fund for the cost of buying grave liners and then selling them.
And the burial rights money that we collect from the sale of graves can be used to help fund some of the development costs. So that's something that, help defray what the town would need to help us with as far as acquiring or developing land. And the good news is that the non-contingent budget that the cemetery submitted is less than the previous year, so it's $40,000 less.
Yeah, can we talk about the differences between the contingent and non-contingent budget for a minute?
Sure.
Do you want to give an overview, or do you want us to just jump in with some questions?
Well, the reason the non-contingent budget is a lot less is because of a change of personnel. A couple of employees, longtime employees retired, and so other employees are slowly, being promoted into positions, but at a lower level than the previous employees. And we had a buyout of someone's sick leave the year before. So that's why that number is less. The contingent request, there's some administrative fees. That's where I put the money for development. So I added, in administrative fees, I added $8,000. No, I'm sorry, professional services. That's the line item that was increased to hire surveyors and engineers in order to develop new sections. And under tree work, we need that money to remove trees in the new areas that for development. Administrative fees, that was for a computer software program that would allow people to go online and search for burials to see if they're at our cemetery and where they're located, as well as a memorial obituary page where you could, find someone who's been recently buried, or even like a long time ago, if we have the information, and read their obituary or a bit about their life or a tribute.
My question about the contingent budget is, in your narrative, you outlined a $26,000 increase, increased to $26,000, sorry, and that you were expecting some high cost of repairs for truck body work and backhoe. I think you meant in 17, you said it won't be repeated in 19?
17, sorry, that's a typo.
So, all right, so you mean you won't have those charges in 17? Is that what you meant?
I hope not. We might have something equal, but not for those particular vehicles.
Okay. I was just wondering if you could speak to, if you do have repair costs that are in your contingent budget, and you definitely have some development costs that are in your contingent budget, what happens if we have a non-contingent scenario and we're having to make cuts on the town and school budgets, and you're not able to do your development and any repair that you have in your contingent budget?
Well, if we can't do the development, then it's just going to stall the ability to have an inventory available for sale again. So then we'd probably need to keep the policy in place for only pre-need sales, at-need sales. As far as the equipment repair,
Are there any drawbacks to keeping that program stalled on future sales, or what are the repercussions of putting that off another year? Or?
well, I think, and that we spoke with the Warrant Committee about 5 or 6 years ago, the perpetual care fund is very small for a cemetery that was established in 1672. Many cemeteries that were established in the mid-1800s, like Woodlawn or Forest Hills, they have, multi-million-dollar perpetual care fund. And we're hoping to build that up so that in time, when the cemetery is not making as much money as they are now, that the interest from that fund will help to maintain the cemetery. So if we can sell graves now, that money will be in the fund that much longer. So we're stalling our investment as well.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
And it takes quite a bit of time to develop a section, as far as getting permitting from the Conservation Commission and getting the funding and doing the construction work.
Is it true that the state law requires us to have graves for sale?
It's in the
town?
state law. I don't know what happens if a town runs out of graves, but you are obliged to bury the dead within your town.
Okay. And one thing that I didn't notice in your presentation this year that sticks in my mind from last year was a size comparison to the Mount Auburn Cemetery, along with how many employees you have on your staff versus how many they have in Mount Auburn. Do you remember that off the top of your head?
Well, I know they have about 200 acres, and we have 104, and they have 80 employees, and we have 8. So
about half the size.
About $230 million, and we have 3.
About half the size and a tenth of the employees. I just thought that was a really interesting comparison.
It is, but, we could use a whole lot more employees when we did the monument restoration workshop. the preservation specialist who came in said you could really have 2 full-time people all year long just doing this kind of work, because there's a lot of it out there. It hasn't been done for a long time. Just for one particular job duty. So there is a lot of, to maintain a cemetery as well as people expect it, it's a high-maintenance landscape, and people expect it to be perfectly kept.
One or two more questions on the contingent versus non-contingent. If you want to just run down some of the other major increases, there is some money in there for equipment, and then also for, I think it's fuel and oil. And I'm wondering, same question, if we have a contingent budget that has a higher number for something like fuel and oil, how will you get by without that fuel and oil in a non-contingent scenario?
Well, we have to pay the fuel bill, so we'd have to cut back somewhere else. And we'd either not be able to, we'd have to delay repairs, expensive repairs to some of the equipment. Maybe retire some of the equipment.
Okay.
We have done some other, we're hoping to, reduce our electric bill. We're putting some solar array panels on one of the new buildings.
Nice.
Great.
Can I just ask a question about employees? Compared to the number you have now, which you said was 8, like 10 years ago, did you have more employees and you have less now, or has it been about the same?
When I first started in 1988,
88.
we had 10.
Okay.
So now we have 8, and we have a lot more acres developed. So we have a lot more. There were, 16 to 20, I think, probably back in 1960s, but because of the advent of mechanized equipment, they didn't need as many employees.
Okay. Other questions on the budget? Yep, Steve?
Does any money come out of the perpetual care fund on an annual basis, or is that all sitting in there?
It's all being reinvested. And we did an analysis of the perpetual care fund some years ago, because it just wasn't growing, and we wanted to find out why it wasn't growing. And it was because every year we would give the town a proportion of the money that was made in interest and principal. And so we were just sometimes giving the town more than we made the year before, and so we just weren't getting ahead with it.
So is money just accumulating in there, or is money coming out of it? The interest, anyway, currently.
Cemetery.
It's just being reinvested.
So that the perpetual care, that the folks that are paid for it in there is getting out of the town, out of the operating budget rather than the perpetual care budget.
Yes. So we're looking at building that up as perpetual care for the long term. When the 104 acres are filled, and who's going to take care of it? So.
And how do your rates compare? I'll cop to it. I'm one of those hard cases that thinks that the cemetery should be pretty much run as a business and its expenses, and it should meet it. And I know, and that's given that the town has an obligation for indigent and veterans and things like that. But to me, $400,000 plus is money that can be spent on other things when from a business case. If your expenses were meeting your income more closely, I think that would be a good thing. But where do your rates compare to other local cemeteries for acquisition of graves and interments and things like that?
Well, we're always looking at the rates, and we do surveys of other cemeteries annually to see where we stand. And we're on the upper end of, definitely the upper end of municipal cemeteries, and up on the upper end with some service fees for private cemeteries as well.
Do you have any examples? The upper end, I trust you, but what does that mean compared to what?
Compared to what? Well, the opening fee is, we have a price list. Our opening fee for a grave is $1,200. To purchase a grave is $2,000 each grave. Varies, $2,000 to $2,500. Yeah, we have overtime costs for Saturday burials, it's $800. Our liners are they're in a revolving fund, so we are installing those, and we're making enough money to purchase them. And then the town gets the installation fee.
Thank you.
I know, I really think they're on the upper end. We have thought about raising prices, but we just recently raised the prices of the grave liners.
And how about the perpetual care? Where are you on that compared to other folks? Are you going to be able to get to the point where, there'll be enough in there to, when there's no more graves to sell and no more graves to fill, then it's a parkland and a garden, and, at that point, does it turn over to the park department, or what happens to it? It might be 50 years from now, but, eventually it happens that it's full.
Right, probably in about 100 years it would be full, I would think. I don't know. But as far as being able to sell graves, we're going to run out of space. But then we'll be filling those grave spaces for years to come. And I'm not sure, the perpetual care fund is something that the trustees are working on. We had a donation a few years ago of $162,000, and they just deposited that in their perpetual care fund. So we're doing ongoing fundraising efforts to try to increase that besides just from the sale of graves, so that if people want to do estate planning, they can leave money to the perpetual care fund for the long-term care of the cemetery.
Thank you.
Michael had a question?
I was just wondering, how big does the perpetual care fund have to get before you can not ask the town for any money? And once the graves are all sold in the future, in 100 years, or 50 years, or whenever that time comes. You must think very long-term, being in the cemetery business.
I'm not a mathematician, I'm not an accountant. But you would have to get to the point where the interest from the perpetual care fund was about what the appropriation is necessary
So,
to.
you need to get something that throws off like $800,000 a year in interest, roughly.
Yes.
It's very big. Okay.
But if we're talking about, it depends upon where you are at in time. If you're not making any more burials, then you're just going to be maintaining the grounds. And you wouldn't be making the burials, but.
Yeah, I assume your staff would mix would be different, you wouldn't have development fees, there would be a lot that's different about a maintenance budget versus the current budget.
But back of the envelope, it's still
The number.
It's a long
Big
ways
number,
away.
yes.
Right. Phil, you had a question?
Yeah, two questions, actually. What's the value of the perpetual care fund now?
3.5 million. And it can be increased with the sale of graves, and it should, depending upon how much it costs to develop an area, an acre of graves would sell for about, I don't know, it's usually about $5 million an acre that you can make from this sale of
Is there
graves.
a report in the annual report, town annual report on how that's invested and what the interest rate return is on it?
No, I
No.
don't think it is.
No? Okay,
This is, we have
okay,
4 lines for the cemetery perpetual care fund.
okay.
The town treasurer oversees that.
Okay.
And he has,
My other question was, you mentioned that the state law requires the town of Milton to continue to provide burial services for residents even once the cemetery is filled. And yet, it doesn't appear that we've done any research in terms of what we will do when that happens. And the question would become, should some of the proceeds that are going into the current cemetery be set aside to prepare for alternative ways to treat the deceased of Milton who want to be buried in Milton once that cemetery is filled? When are you projecting that, with the new growth you've got and the new land, when are you projecting it will be filled?
we won't have any more graves to sell, I would say, in 20 years.
20 years.
And what a lot of cemeteries do, if you know, it's a big upfront cost, they'll start building mausoleums so that you can,
So you continue to use the same land and you build above ground?
yes.
And can you essentially double the number of folks buried in the cemetery by doing that?
Well, we don't have that much space that you could, you know, you have limited space where you could build a mausoleum, and they're expensive to build and to maintain, so it's going to be a lot more expensive than an in-ground burial cost.
Okay. So we face an issue in 20 years of what we're going to be doing with Milton residents who wish to have their remains buried in Milton.
Yes.
Okay. Has
I
anyone
think
given?
all along, we've been seeing the trend of cremation increasing, and then there may be a lot of reuse of old family lots.
Has the cemetery trustees done anything to begin to think about this issue?
Oh, yes, they discuss it quite frequently, and we're looking at another piece of land to acquire, if it's possible, that's contiguous with a cemetery. We did.
What do other communities do when they reach the end of their land?
They find some more land. It's not going to be,
Therese, can you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I thought that under state law, towns had the option to purchase land in a different town, and that still counted as their cemetery, even though it's not in their contiguous town, that as long as they can still provide a plot somewhere else. Is that not your understanding, or is that not true?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
Are you aware of any communities buying land in other towns?
I've never heard of that.
No, neither have I.
Okay. Thank
But you could buy land in a place that is, not contiguous with the cemetery. That's what they'll have to look for.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And most towns have, a plethora of little cemeteries that they're maintaining. But we're lucky enough to have one large space.
If you were to add an acre, how many years do you think that adds to your cemetery?
An acre, it'd be about 1,000 burials at the rate that we're selling burial, maybe 300 a year. So then you're looking at another
3 years.
3 or 4 years. Okay. Thank you. We had the consolidated facilities in the other day, and we were chatting about additional places in town where more consolidation could happen and where that's beneficial and not beneficial. I don't think that there's currently a lot of consolidation between consolidated facilities and the cemetery crew. Is that true? And why does that scenario exist? Is there any opportunity there for increased efficiencies?
The trustees had decided at the time the Consolidated Facilities Group was put together that they wanted to maintain the buildings and grounds themselves and continue that control. I think they felt that it wasn't broken, so why fix it? And also the cemetery, in my opinion, sometimes is at the bottom of the totem pole as far as services if you're waiting for someone to come and repair something. We already have the talent within our organization to do that ourselves.
But you are looking to fill positions, and I have heard a significant amount of praise for the Consolidated Facilities Department, and I haven't heard a lot of departments complaining that they're waiting a long time to get service. So you have open positions, and we're hearing praise for Consolidated Facilities. I would hope that there's an ongoing conversation there about the best way to use town resources and utilize a consolidated department. Are there ongoing discussions, or is this just something that was put to bed a while ago and there hasn't been any collaboration?
No, Bill, Richie, and I have collaborated on quite a few different things. She's been very helpful. And there's been a lot of compliments about how the cemetery runs as well. So I think they're both doing well. They have a lot on their plate, the Consolidated Facilities Department.
Right.
And we're doing a lot of that building and grounds maintenance within our own organization. I don't really think, unless they added a lot of employees, that they could help us out to the extent that we'd need to be.
I'm just thinking, what was the reason for making consolidated facilities in the first place, and why is the cemetery different than the other departments that consolidated?
Well, the parks and the cemeteries boards opted out of it.
Right. I'm going to ask the parks in a few minutes.
I think it was probably the fact that, we can control better what needs to be maintained and what doesn't.
Okay.
Because we know our property better, we know how to prioritize our needs. And I think they felt maybe an outside department wouldn't have the same knowledge of the inner workings of the maintenance of the cemetery and the buildings.
Okay. I would assume that if part of consolidation is maybe moving employees with a knowledge base over, maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, that's what the other departments
But I would
did.
think that you wouldn't lose all of the skills that exist on the current staff if they were to be consolidated with consolidated facilities. So I would love to hear some ongoing discussions about, are there ways to save, and here are some ways that we did save over last year. That would be an interesting update in your presentation for the warrant committee about, we looked for cost savings opportunities, and we found them by collaborating with consolidated facilities in the following ways.
Collaborate a lot with the DPW, and they've been helpful with different projects that we've had, as well as consolidated. So there's always collaboration, and we've helped them out, they help us out.
Yeah.
We're not like our own little fiefdoms, we work together.
Okay. Other questions?
Just one more, yeah. Did you hear the Planet Money blog or podcast about cemeteries in Europe,
No.
by any chance? They have the problem of running out of land, and they have a lot more people. So they have ossuaries. They don't sell you perpetual plot of land. After a certain 100 years go by, your bones go into a vault.
Right, it's temporary burials in Italy.
In Italy, right.
Yeah.
Would we ever consider starting that? I mean, grandfathering and everybody's already in there, but maybe coming up with a new plan for I only need 100 years to save on,
You'd have to-
to stretch out space, because, land is at a
Right.
premium in Milton.
I haven't heard of any American cemeteries doing that. When you purchase a burial spot, that's supposed to be forever, and in the use of concrete grave liners and vaults has made that a permanent grave space, because it never collapses. And that was a problem of cemetery maintenance in the past, that, when the casket finally collapses, then the ground collapses, and there was always like an uneven ground. I understand what you're saying, and it is, I think that 100 years from now, people are going to say, what were they thinking? They used all this land, and it can't be used again. And so there is a lot of discussion about what other ways we can do that, cremation being one of them.
Okay.
Other questions for Therese? Yes, Steve?
Not for this year, but for next year, to get a more in-depth explanation of how the perpetual care works and what kind of income spins off of it, and maybe even a little discussion of their investment strategy would be a nice thing to know.
Okay, there is a person that manages it, and he could come to do that.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah, Ted?
Yeah, just on that same point, do you have any clue what the perpetual care fund for Mount Auburn is?
I think it's 230 million.
Okay.
But that's not a municipal cemetery.
No, it's a private cemetery.
It's very expensive.
If you want to buy a single grave there, it's $40,000.
Yeah, it's not a good comparison.
And you can't have a monument on that.
Not a good comparison at all.
No, that's...
Well, we were using Mount Auburn's other numbers.
Well, we shouldn't.
In a
It's not a
comparison.
good comparison. It's, like the Mercedes-Benz of
What kind of
cemeteries.
what cemetery do you compare yourself to?
Mount Auburn. We just don't have the income. That's the difference between Mount Auburn and our cemetery.
Well, when you're thinking of a municipal park-like cemetery, there must be another town that has one that's about 100 acres, 120 acres.
I think maybe the one in Needham. Sometimes we compare ourselves to Cedar Grove because they're about our size as far as like pricing. And the cemeteries in Arlington.
Yeah, I didn't realize that one from the numbers from last year's presentation, but that would be interesting to see some comparisons to who you consider your peer cemeteries to be in terms of revenue and expenses with staff.
Right, well, they've always been for-profit cemeteries, and this Milton Cemetery originally would give 12 grave lots to any resident, any family that applied for them, and it would only be a $100 perpetual care cost. So the lots were free. So that over time didn't allow us to build up the perpetual care fund. So if we had started charging market prices back in the mid-1800s, so now we're playing catch-up for the mistakes of the past.
Or the generosity of the past.
They're generous.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Therese. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Guys, you want to come up and join us at the table? We're going to switch over to Parks Department.
We're
It's David and Kevin, right?
Yes.
Do you guys want to introduce yourselves to the committee?
I'm Dave Perdios, the Director, Park and Recreation.
Kevin Chrism, Park Commissioner.
Thanks so much for coming in tonight. We have your budget in front of us, and Ted
Not yet.
is putting it up. I have it on paper anyway. Ted's going to put it up on the screen in just a minute. And we sent around an email, I think it was yesterday, that had the new revolving fund information in it. And that was great to receive. Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions that I have about contingent versus non-contingent, and a few other things that I'd like to go into, but I'm wondering if you want to start with just a really quick overview of the Parks and Rec Department and what you are able to do for the town with the investment of the operating expense budget.
Okay, we're responsible for roughly 115 acres of green space. Mostly, it's active recreation space that the town youth, high school, and adults in the community use for athletics, just regular recreation, just regular enjoyment. There's a small amount that is more passive. Crane Park comes to one over in East Milton, a small, nice little field that trees and a walkway with a monument. A couple others that exist, small parcels that we are responsible to take care of. We also help the police station out. We cut their facility, cut their grass once it starts to grow. Additional responsibility if Pope's Pond, which you cross over Blue Hill, and I'm at a loss what that first street is on the right opposite the gas station, but there's a small little green. There's a small little green area there that we've maintained for the last 7 or 8, 9 years. We cut it with the youth programs that have grown in the town. In the lack of field space, the kids that's actually become an athletic facility, a practice facility. So it wasn't being cut for the longest time, and it's under the jurisdiction of the selectmen / DPW, and we've been cutting that for a while. So we also help out up at Houghton's Pond once in a while when they get backed up at the DCR. We'll go up there and cut that. 90% of the field space on the fields up there, that is used by Milton youth. We have our softball programs, our soccer, and our baseball. So we'll have to go up there. We'll get a call once in a while, and they'll ask us to go up and cut it. Or we'll get a call from one of our league presidents, whether it's soccer, and say, hey, they're not keeping up with it, and then I'll coordinate with my counterpart up there. And again, because we have main usage. So we're handling just about every piece of green space in town that is used for athletics. There's a few that we're not, but that's it. PS Field behind the PS School is a field that is owned by the school department, but we maintain it. We handle the cutting, the irrigation, the turf maintenance. We also handle the funding for that, too. And it's used probably a 50-50 split between the high school athletics and the youth athletics, the soccers, the footballs. And in return, we get a reduced rate in our rental fees with the schools when we run our programs inside in the gyms. So it's a marriage that happened a few years ago, and so far so good. Condition of our fields, our heavily used fields up at the high school, the lower football field, Kelly Field. It's used by a combination of youth and high school, and it's constant. We're close to losing them. We fight, we spend money, we try to stay up with it, we aerate, we slice seed, we water, we do whatever we can. It's just we don't have enough field space on top of what we have. We actually send our youth baseball programs over to Quincy, Quarry Hills. We have a field over there that they allow us to use 5 or 6 days a week in the summers for our youth baseball programs. That's actually DCR land, and when they built that, there was a agreement that they could, Quincy would have full rights, but an outside community, one existing community within their Quincy area could apply for use, and we jumped right on it, and we've had that use for a few years. We don't have to maintain it, but it just goes to it speaks for our lack of field space. Milton Academy is letting us use some fields. I wish we had more, but, we'll use it for lacrosse, soccer, softball, baseball. So we're reaching out everywhere, and our fields are they're overused, and they're taking a beating, and we're trying to maintain and stay up with it. But it's not easy. It's getting harder and harder, because once we lose the roots, you're either gonna rebuild it, or you need to shut it down. And we can't shut it down, because we just don't have the field space to let a field just sit for a season. In a good comparison, if you go down to Andrews Park, where it's just strictly youth on that soccer field, pretty much. Fontbonne girls use it a little bit, but it's green all the time. And we spend the least amount of money on our turf maintenance at Andrews Field, because it's first of all, it's good rich soil, we have good root zones there, but it's not being used by the lacrosses, the footballs, and the whole bit, in constant, the rugbys, the Gaelic football. So that's kind of an overview of our field. So what you see, the 122,000 in general expenses basically gets eaten up by that. It will this year, and in years past, whether it was 88 or 56 or 66, whatever the number was, it was eaten up rather quickly on just trying to stay up and maintain, and that's not even addressing the water issues. And we've made some good strides with our water controls. We have a well at Kelly now that's up and running well. We have a well at Flatley that is up and running. And it's important to note that Flatley Field was a gift to the town, to the park department. Milton kids were using it, and it was gifted to us. It was great, we needed the acreage, but along with it came all the expenses. And there was no reciprocation on the budget to cover all those expenses. So we were lucky we negotiated, within the transfer, we negotiated with Fuller that they install a well, which has helped with that water bill there. But again, it's a heavily used piece of property, and the maintenance there is rather high with the slice seeding and the turf maintenance program. And again, when we took over the Pierce, again, additional acreage, combined probably about 6 acres between the two sites, no additional funds to maintain it. We had to absorb that, both from our personnel, working there with no increase in personnel, and then budget-wise. So we're holding our own, but I see Kelly and I see Lower Guile slipping away from us as far as maintaining them. It's a reality, it's too bad, but so from an operating budget, that's kind of the rundown. I'm not sure if you have any more specific questions about that, I'm ready to answer them, but that kind of gives you a little bit of picture of that.
Well, there are some pretty significant differences between your non-contingent and your contingent budgets. And I'm wondering, with respect to Kelly and Lower Guile, are you going to be able to get them to the place where you need them to be under the contingent scenario? What is that money going to get you? Or to put it a different way, we very well could be looking at a non-contingent budget scenario and not going for an override, or not having an override pass, and we'll have to take some cuts to the budgets. What would we be losing if we had to go with your non-contingent budget?
Right now, the difference between what we have, depending on what the amount is each year on the general expenses, we've supplemented that funds from our rental revolving and our recreation revolving. Roughly about 20 to 25% every year. We'll take from those funds and cover the shortfall in the general expense line item to where we are. So the reality is, we're spending roughly, whether it's coming from the general expenses or from the revolving accounts, we're spending roughly $160,000 a year right now on field maintenance to cover our general expenses. And we're still in this state. So that money's gonna allow us to maintain what we're doing, whether it's contingent or not. If there is an override and we get the contingent, it's just gonna basically supplement the revolving account money that we were shifting over. The possibility would be we may be able to rebuild the field at that time with some of our recreation revolving account money. I can't give you that answer as far as where we would spend that money, and
But would it be fair to say that there's some lost opportunity by not being able to use those revolving funds for other things? I mean, I'm wondering why the scenario you just described isn't the everyday good scenario that we would want, where, you don't want to have too much of a balance in your revolving funds, right? They're meant to take in and then expend and not just grow out of control. So what kind of things would you do if you were able to build up balances in the revolving fund is a good question.
we would basically rebuild some fields. We would one of the first priorities would be go after our playground areas, our toddler facilities, and we have them at Andrews, Mary C. Lane, Kelly, Shields. We would attempt to rebuild those and either completely rebuild them or go piece by piece. We're borderline, we're within code, but it's getting there where they have to be done. There's a group in town that we're working with right now to try to come up with some money to do that. Capital gave us some money to move forward on those fixes. So that would be one area. The
For
other
the
area.
playground, you mean, right?
Yes.
Do you want to pause there for a minute and just chat about the playground group for a minute? What has your involvement been, and where do you see that going, and what kind of collaboration could there be?
I've been involved with them from the beginning, and my opinion and my advice to them was that they would have to fund this thing pretty much on their own. The amount of money they were talking, anywhere from $600,000 to $700,000, we told them we didn't see it coming from the town anytime soon. We told them we would work with them. I spent days with them, walking the parks, meeting with different vendors, but it's been pretty much them running the show, trying to raise the money. We did add some money to our capital request for a small amount of money to maybe seed money to get it going, or we would want to use some of that money to fix some of the playgrounds up, but it was at the expense of leaving the tennis courts at Kelly Field, the four of them, not getting done, with their 2-inch and 1-inch cracks throughout the whole thing, and a high school team that doesn't want to play there. So we support, I think Kevin will back this up, their efforts.
They are very aggressive in their, what they're trying to do, and they just had a fundraiser last week. And they've been great, and they come to our meetings, and there's a lot of back and forth between both sides, and it's a very valiant effort what they're doing, and hopefully it goes further.
Well, that sounds encouraging. I'll repeat, since it's on television, that a couple of weeks ago, somebody sitting in that seat said that when the playground group went to the Parks and Rec department to say, we're going to try to raise all of this money for this new equipment, we'd like you to maintain it, that the response was, there's no money to maintain it. And I wonder, have you gamed out what it would cost to maintain the new equipment that they're looking at putting in for roughly $750,000? And yeah, have you looked at that?
It's kind of hard. Yeah, we have in a sense. Obviously, when it's all new, the initial cost is going to be pretty much nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of us just being there every day and making sure. And then it all depends on what type of surface they put in. So they're kind of all over the board, whether it's a rubber surface, whether it's a wood chip surface, or whatever. The maintenance will go down considerably because it's all new equipment.
Right.
And you're looking at 5, 6, 7 years down the road, outside of vandalism, where our maintenance will have to come in, but the initial maintenance is going to be trash, which we do at all those parks as it is.
Yep.
Graffiti, when the graffiti hits it, take care of it. If for some reason there's vandalism, we take it, but my view is, if it's new, a lot of that will go away.
Yep.
It's the cost of doing the new stuff. That's, again, I think it was $125,000 was allotted by the capital.
That's right.
And that's great. And if we just had the 125, I could go down to Andrews and replace the slide that's been burnt underneath. And I can go to Shields and put a new bridge in. And I can go down to Kelly Field and put a couple of new pieces in. But I can't fix it. And the issue is, we have 125 now in the capital. So we need to have someone else, they need to move quick, come up with the other
Right.
X amount of dollars if we're gonna be able to work together with them, or we're gonna have to come to a point where, what are we gonna do with this 125? Are we gonna piecemeal it? Or are we gonna, it was kind of my idea to do them all. I already had been out getting quotes to just repair and bring to code each playground. And it was roughly gonna run about $125,000. And that was just a fixer-upper. Nothing new, nothing. So they're on the right track. Do it new, do it right. It's just raising the money.
Yeah, but it sounds like a great opportunity, and clearly there's a lot of energy there, so I just want to make sure that you're helping to corral them in the right direction and give them,
I've worked real close with them.
motivation.
I've been out on the fields with Carolyn, and she's the one that called me, sent an email, and we jumped right on it. Again, we also don't want to mislead them that, the town's gonna have all this money. And I was very clear with them up front. There isn't $600,000. It's gonna take your effort. We'll work with you. I brought in their consultant. I put him in touch with Nancy White, who's she's been my consultant over the years. She's working close with them. It's just, we don't want to give them the impression that the town is gonna pick up all this. And I'm not sure if they were looking for a little bit more than that. I think they're on the right track. I think they're going in the right direction. It just might take a little time.
Well, they did submit a citizens petition article and will be coming here to the Warrant Committee to talk with us about a potential appropriation. So they are thinking of other funding sources in the town in addition to their fundraising efforts.
I had suggested a couple also. I won't say who on, but I had suggested that they contact a couple other foundations or whatever in the community to see if you could get that, to kind of push it along. As far as I'm concerned, I'm on board with it. I've been planning this, and I have quotes and everything. We need to do something about it.
Yep. Betty?
I don't expect you to know this right off the top, but I'm wondering, the last playground planners built brand-new playgrounds 22 years ago. I was wondering, over those 20-plus years, what the maintenance has been on the playgrounds, the 4 playgrounds specifically. If there's been a line item to address some of the playground issues over the last 20 years, because this group was saying that they're in terrible disrepair. So obviously, the last group I think they raised about $1 million 20 years ago, that group. And I just was wondering, is there money, and do you make the playgrounds something that your budget addresses?
If they build new playgrounds, we'll be able to maintain it.
I know, but 20 years ago, they did, and obviously, they haven't been maintained very well.
I disagree with that. Totally disagree with that. It depends on what your idea is and what your thought is as far as maintained. Every day, we're there, we pick the trash, we take care of it. But we have a slide that is gonna cost $30,000 down at Andrews that was burnt out 5 years ago. It's still stable, it's fine. We don't have the money to replace it.
Burnt out.
It was, the bottom of it, there's an area that the kids lit it on fire. But as far as maintaining the everyday, the swings, the chains, you name it, we're more a reactionary type of thing. When a seat on a swing is broke, we replace it. We either have it in stock, or we'll order it, get it in 2 days, and put it in. When we find a chain that is missing a link or we'll switch it. When we have a piece down at Kelly that the kids kick out one night, we put up a piece of board, we order a new piece. So it's more of a reaction type of thing. But on an everyday type of maintenance, we're putting new wood chips in every year at each one of them. The problem is, they're old pieces, and it's not new, it's not exciting. And if you go over to Quincy and you go to their new $250,000 playground up at Faxon Park, it's all new stuff. The the stuff is old. I was involved with the initial playground planners. Actually, my wife was, but I knew the people who ran it, and it was great at the time. It's just the pieces are old, but we maintain them on a regular basis. But, you know, when you have old-style swings, the old gray metal swings that are down at Mary C. Lane, we can't do anything about that. It looks terrible, it is terrible, but we have to make sure that the chains are fixed and the seats are fine so no one gets hurt. But the aesthetics are terrible. So if they put in new pieces, we will maintain it on a daily basis. If there's damage or there's vandalism, which we get in certain areas, if we have the funds, we'll do it. But overall, the general cost each year, the big issues are the wood chips, which is probably $1,500 per facility. You know, we'll use a little paint. We'll buy a couple of swings. Every 2 or 3 years, we'll restock our swings. The bucket seats, we need the, so you're talking maybe another $1,500, $1,600. It's more of a daily type of thing where we're already there doing some of the work.
So what would you estimate you spend a year maintaining the playground equipment?
I would say, right now, no more than $5,000 to $8,000. No more than that. And that includes the wood chips. Now, it doesn't include if we get something that has to be full, like we had to replace the bridge at Elliott Shields Playground about 5 years ago. It was a $2,400 item, and it was like a $1,500 installation, if you can believe it. That's not the norm. Down at Andrews, we had a situation where we had a lot of toddlers starting to use that. It was built for 6 to 9, 6 to 10, and then we had toddlers, and we had the community ask us, could we put in a new bridge with new rails and shorten up the distances, bring it into code. That was an expense above and beyond. That was about $4,000. We made that pitch. But on a regular basis, to maintain those, especially when they're new, we're not going to have an issue with that at all.
Yeah, Michael?
I just feel so old, because I can remember 22 years ago working for playground planners and putting in these nice new playgrounds all over town, which are now old and gray and like me.
Like us.
I'm just curious, the $30,000 damage at Andrews, don't we have insurance coverage for something like that, for vandalism?
No.
And it's been checked out by our consultants. It's safe. It's safe. And again, that would be one of the areas, the first area with the 125, if we decide to spend it in that area, is going to go to replacing that side.
So how much damage would we have to have before we could put a claim in
I don't think we can put a claim.
at all?
That's been my knowledge. I mean, unless, what I've been told, on any of our backstops or whatever. We had a ton of snow damage this past thing, but anything like that, we've always had to absorb that cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the snow damage for last year, how's that affecting your budget, or is it affecting your budget this year?
In all honesty, it really hasn't.
The grounds were not,
No, we stayed away from putting snow on the fields.
yeah,
We had some damage up at the high school area where they threw the snow over. Some more guardrail stuff, not much to the field. So we were pretty forceful, the commissioners were pretty forceful about no fields, can't dump it there.
good.
The parking lot our parking lots are a disgrace.
Right.
I mean, and again, that's a whole nother issue. You get down to Andrews, you go to Kelly, they destroyed the Kelly, and we're still waiting for that repair to come through. It has to be replaced. So DPW has told us they will get to that, and it needs to all be ground down and replaced. Pretty much everything else down there has been repaired, although for a snowstorm, they whacked out the fence again. So, it's never ending. And
exactly.
it's not like we have well, I won't even get into the finances, but DPW, after we got to the point where we got them to do work with us, because they had a list that was like this, and we had to keep pushing them, because we were on that list somewhere on what needed to be done. We finally got it done, and it came out good, everything's fine. The parking lot needs to go. The Andrews parking lot is terrible. It has cracks, the storm drain's sinking where it is. The good thing is our playgrounds at Mary C. Lane and in Shields, we have, it's a hard-packed dirt, so all we really have to do is go in every once in a while and backfill it. So that's a good thing. We can maintain that a little bit better. But those two parking lots are kind of beat up bad.
Steve McCurdy had a question.
Steve, how are you?
Good, how are you? Changing subjects a little bit. Last year at town meeting, there was kind of a dust-up on the special needs program and whether you had one or didn't have one, whether it was funded, it wasn't funded. Can you tell us what you have and how it's funded?
To give you some history, dates me. When I first started about 19 years ago, we had roughly $12,000 to $16,000 in a special needs line item. That was part of the tax levy and over years it disappeared because of budgets, whatever. And we formed the special needs gift account. And we do several things to fund the activities that we do for the kids. Actually, they're young adults now, they're not just kids. Cunningham Foundation, we get donations every year. Milton Junior Women's Club, we receive donations every year. Copeland has helped us out here and there. Our February baseball clinic that I run every February at the high school, those funds get put toward our special needs programs. The Blue Hills Cycle Club makes a donation every year to the special needs program. So we've been able to build a good base of people and fund it. It's roughly funded with anywhere from $13,000 to $15,000, $16,000 a year. And we've been running the program on that money every year. What are the programs? We run our Wednesday night gym buddy that we're roughly in like our 16th year of running that. We have kids that have been in that program for 15 years. We now have young adults in there, or 25, 26-year-olds. They've been in this program all along. We also run a summer 1 or 2 week program that it's more or less a, we take the kids down to Cunningham, they stay in the Girl Scout house. We take them to field trips, we do stuff like that. We give them their own week or two, and we take them, sometimes we send them with our Cunningham playground program. We'll put them on the same bus. We'll go to Dave and Buster's, or we'll go down to Waterwiz, kind of get a little inclusion in there. We're going, on February 15th, we're going to Disney on Ice. We're taking all the kids in there. It'll be a one-on-one, 15 kids and 15. We have about, so that'll be a nice little thing. So those are the things that this money is paying for. So we've been able to fund everything that we do for these kids with donations and programs that we run. And I'm real comfortable that we can continue to do that and make it work. We want to start a secondary, we want to start another night during the school year for the younger kids in town. We have a good group, around 20 special needs, we call them our buddies, who have participated on the Wednesday night program. We're having a hard time getting the young kids because they'll come in and there's that age differential now. We got to kind of close it. So we're looking at maybe doing a pilot program, maybe in March, where we'll do like a Tuesday night and try to get some of the younger kids in town, maybe the 8, 9s and the 10s and the 11s, and build a whole nother group. Because there's a group out there, we've had them, they've come in and they get intimidated. Not that it's a friendly environment, it's just tough to mix that ages. So that's something we'd like to do. And again, it's not a big expense, and I think we can handle that. There's been 1 or 2 times where we've asked these parents to pay for these programs. But because we've been very successful trying to raise this money, it's pretty much, we don't ask them for anything. And I really don't want to. So, thanks.
Phil has a question.
Dave, you said you spend $13,000 to $15,000 on special needs. Is that all money that comes from donations, or is any that come from your budget from the town?
All donations,
Say it again, all what?
all donations. Our recreation programs, and anything, our recreation, our special needs programs, all generated from either donations or fees. All of it. Not one dime from the town tax levy goes toward running any of our recreation programs or the special needs program.
And if you were not able to raise that money from private sources, would you have money in your budget to provide services to these kids?
Absolutely not,
And why is that?
because there's no recreation line item.
I'm sorry?
There's no recreation line item. There's no money there for, we have our general expenses, we have our salary and wages that cover my 3 laborers, myself and my clerk, and I have my overtime, my seasonal, and that's it. There's 0 on the recreation. So I don't know where that money would come from. We'd have to continue to go out and look to find the funds to, or I'd have to charge these people.
Right.
There's the answer, I'd have to charge them.
Like you do for the other?
Yeah.
Like a fee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess that's, goes against what I want to do, but yeah, and when you break it down, it's the furthest thing from my mind. That's why I kind of slipped, but, yeah, we'd have to charge them.
Are there things right now that the residents are asking for in the special needs program in terms of accommodations or new activities or anything that you haven't been able to provide that you'd like to be able to provide? Or even that they've asked for that you haven't considered yet?
We don't have, we don't have the funds to hire certified, qualified people to handle real severe issues or one-on-ones. We just don't have that. You're talking more, someone from the professional field who could come in and deal with some of our kids. We don't have the funds to do one-on-ones. So that's been cropping up a little bit, but other than that, I'm always asking, what more do you want? What can we do? And I'm confident that if we were to get like this new program, we're getting people want us, can you run another program for the younger kids? We'll find the money. I'll go back to Cunningham, I'll go back to whoever, and we'll find someone who will donate the money to make that work. So that's probably the biggest thing, the younger kids, can you do anything with that age group? And maybe have their own program, and then somewhere along the line, mesh it down the road. That would be the big thing that we've been asked. Other than that, I really, nothing sticks out.
Okay. I wonder if there's an opportunity for some sort of a community forum or something to get some feedback from, parents who feel like there are options in other towns or things that they've heard about, just to get a pipeline of information coming into you, because clearly there was some good passion expressed at town meeting last year, and it did seem sincere, so I just want to make sure that we're following up on that. There is a $5,000 line item here on your contingent budget. What would you imagine to do with that $5,000 if we were able to fund it?
Well, basically, start the new program and move forward with some other different things. We take a lot of field trips right now with these kids. We'd be able to do more Disney on Ice type of things. Maybe extend the program in the summer instead of being, we usually do 1 or 2 weeks. Maybe we could do 3 weeks for them. So we would probably look to what we have and expand it. Maybe hire some more quality people. I'll be honest with you, hiring just regular people to work these programs is not easy. Right now, I have 2 solid people on Wednesdays. Knock on wood, I don't lose them next year. And I've gone through people because it's just not a lot of money that they're making. They have to love doing it. We have 2 people right now that are in that field, and they really like doing it, and they come down every Wednesday and do it. But who knows what's going to happen.
I think I saw a hand.
I
Betty?
was going to tell you, I work in the Dedham Public Schools, and they have that Pathfinders program. Are you familiar with that?
No.
They run a ton of recreational programs for special needs students of all ages. I'm in an elementary level, and we're always getting emails from them, and they have basketball, baseball, soccer, everything. So you might want to reach out to them just to see how they program it, how they expense it, and see if something like that could be done in Milton.
And also, there's a special education parents affinity group here in Milton
There's a pack.
Yeah.
that I think probably would be willing to come and chat with you.
It was, I'm drawing a blank, the idea, drawing a blank on who it was, a gentleman, and I know him well. We talked 2 years ago about the new younger kid program, and he had spoke with the pack at that time, and they liked the idea, and just never got off the ground. And again, we need to find someone qualified who can handle the program and run it
Okay.
that night. So that's a great idea. We Milton American National Little League, there's a program in Braintree that they run the Little Leagues run a baseball program, Challenger League, and it's cropped up everywhere. My son's special needs, and we used to take him over there for years, but you age out of that. But they've started it in, the National Little League is running a program now on Sundays, and we kind of helped them get it going, but it was there, they picked it up and they ran with it. I guess the attendance has been pretty good, we give them the field down there, but this would be a great way to look.
I know they're Norwood, I know Norwood has one, Dedham has one.
Canton's very active too in what they do on their Saturdays, and it's something that, when I first started, there really were no special needs programs for these kids. So we've built it up and tried to do it, but it's a lot of time, a lot of effort. You need quality people.
Ted's passing something around. Do you want to let everybody know what it is, Ted?
I will, but I also just wanted to mention one thing about the special needs. So when we look at Schedule B, you have a special needs gift line, and that's up on the screen. And I think maybe this is the reason Bill was questioning your use of $13,000 or $14,000 a year on an annual basis, because this is showing about this is showing about $6,800 expended in that program last year. Now, we ran into some difficulties checking out some of these numbers, and there wasn't total agreement between the parks internal numbers and some of the numbers from upstairs. So we're looking into that. But basically, if I could give you I'd like to give you a quick picture of what I feel has been the real problem with trying to figure out the park's budget and what they bring to the town, and what we can do about it going forward. Basically, the town funds half of the activity, or even less than half of the activity of the Parks and Recreation Department. And the other half is funded through some gifts and the recreation revolving and the rental revolving funds that they have. So for instance, just roughly, these numbers aren't perfect, but roughly if you look up here, you'll see that there's $484,000 of revenue from fiscal year 15. Okay, into these accounts. Now, there are a bunch of them that are labeled gifts, okay, and they started out that way, and the special needs is still that way. So there's $5,250 worth of gifts for last year. I think $250 was from Fair and Lovely on the town meeting floor. Some of these other gift accounts started as gifts, but they really aren't gifts anymore, gift accounts anymore. They don't receive gifts. So the income that's listed against them, for instance, Kelly Field gift, it was on the advice of the previous town accountant that Dave started putting rental income for Kelly Field on that Kelly Field line to try and track activity at different locations. There's one for Kelly, there's one for Andrews, there's one for Gile Road. And the problem is that it doesn't capture the whole picture of what's going on in a location. It's putting rental income, like this $14,900, and turning it into something that looks like a gift, whereas it actually should go into the rental revolving fund. And you know, if you have a gift and you spend it, we should get rid of the account. You know, it's just a lot more, you know, and there's no way that we can track all the expenses for Kelly Field just by putting it on that line. So you know, we're going to work with Amy, town accountant, and try and rationalize fiscal year 16 so that we can consolidate all the rental income into the rental revolving and close out some of these gift accounts that haven't seen a gift for years. Obviously, the Crane Park is something new that's very active. There's a gift there. But some of these others just distort the picture and makes it difficult to figure out what is really going on. And what's really going on is let's see if I can find that. Well, the handout that I just put out to you is this one here. And so by going through the gift accounts and the revolving funds, I was able, at least to roughly for last year, look at, I want to get this a little bigger, but anyway. How do I get it bigger? Anyway, I was able to find about 116,000 of contributions from the recreation revolving, that was about 29 there, and the rental revolving contributed almost all of its income, to general expense costs that would have to be picked up in generally anyway to keep the grass green and fertilized and just keep the town's park facilities going. So this is 100 and if you compare this 116 to their regular budget, it's more than the taxpayers are shelling out for maintenance costs, because that was running at about $90,000 a year. So the contribution of the recreation programs and the rental of the facilities is doubling our ability in town to maintain our park facilities and our playing fields. So this is the way it's been, and I guess we have to think about, geez, is this really the way we want it? Or would it be better to have something like that 116,000 in the regular general fund budget, take the pressure off the recreation, take the pressure off for them to make a profit in order to generate these funds. I mean, you could have more and cheaper programs for the kids in town, whatever. But we really need to be able to understand what contribution those revolving funds are making to general expenses. Otherwise, we just don't see the whole picture. So then again, philosophically, which way do you want to go with it? Ask the parks to beef it up and charge more and bring in more money through those programs, or see if we can bring in more money through the general fund and take the pressure off, because these programs can be variable in terms of how much money they might bring in.
It's tough for me to get to the point of talking about taking the pressure off or how to rejigger the money, because I feel like there's a couple of missing pieces to discussing your budget that that I wanted to ask you about tonight. One of them is participation numbers. What kind of numbers of people are using these various activities here, and what are they paying for them? So those are two key things that we would want to look at, I would imagine, in terms of determining ROI, and I wonder if you and your board looks at return on investment for various sports, and if you're looking at new sports and activities that may be less expensive, that are hot right now, or, like pickleball with the older set is really huge right now. I know they just did a big pickleball education event over at Fuller Village, and it's sweeping Florida, where my parents winter. And I just, that is an example of an expensive thing to do unless you're going to just restripe some tennis courts or whatever. But I'm just wondering about how do we look at evaluating your budget and whether it's successful or not successful if we're not talking about the number of people that used it in 14 and the number of people who used it in 15 and how much they paid in 14 and how much they paid in 15. I don't have good comparisons for year to year in terms of usage or fees.
Well, we track internally, for instance, right now, if we're talking program to program, by program, we track the users, the income, program by program. For instance, we know right now we're in the middle of our snowball basketball, and there's roughly 220 kids that participate, boys and girls, grades 3 through 8. We also have a Friday night youth basketball program that we run in 3 gyms, Glover, Cunningham, and Collycott. Roughly 40 kids in each gym. It's another 125. Our summer program with the park program down at Cunningham. Our 8-week program, that varies depending each year. We usually are over 200 kids. We've been as high as 250 a few years ago. But that's a matter of fee. It's $550 to participate per child. We don't discount for multiple childs because it's priced at about $2.30 an hour. But we have, that number varies. 2 years ago, we were down 40 kids. We lost $20,000 from our rental revolving, never to be found, gone. Last year, we got some of it back. We brought it back up to about 216 kids. We do sports camps. We know how many kids, we keep it financial. So from a total standpoint, that's a number we have. We can come up with that. I can't tell you right now that we service 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, but that's a number that we have. Most of our programs are limited, so we have to have that number. Our ID program for our middle school kids.
That's the kind of thing that I'd love to see presented here, and if you could forward us that after your presentation, that would be great. But a lot of the departments, when they come in, their budget comes with a narrative that says, here are the types of things that we'd like to do with a contingent versus non-contingent request, and here are the things that changed from last year. And sometimes they give a little state of the state. And your department is just ripe for a state of the state each year in terms of how many citizens are impacted by the Parks and Rec Department, and what kind of return the town gets on the investment that we make into the Parks and Rec Department. Obviously, a lot of your stuff is break even, or it's self-sustaining or self-supporting. Awesome, great job. Come in and get the credit for it. And then tell us what your goal is. Obviously, you're looking for funding from the town for certain things. I would have loved for you to have brought the playground folks in tonight and have said, this is our long-term goal. We're looking at 2-year and 3-year planning. This is what we're going to do next year, but looking ahead, we're going to ask for an appropriation from you guys for next year, and this is, the numbers that we're looking at, and this is what supports it. Right now, our playgrounds are 20 years old, and there are no kids on them. And, I want you to make the case to me. I don't know what the facts are. I'm saying I want you to come in and make the case. Or, we would really like to invest in the baseball program. It's been declining over the years. Or, it's way off the charts and we need to add another field or whatever. It's really difficult to know just how much to invest in Parks and Rec because I don't know who's using it and what the demand is. So I'd love for a state of the state sort of presentation in terms of what's going on in the town. It's a big investment, and I think it's a worthy one. But we put the library through the ringer in order to make the justification for it.
All kinds of numbers.
We can bring numbers, but I think take a trip up Sunday morning and go to the field house and watch what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Many of you have had kids that have been in the program. I can bring numbers here, and we can do that. All I have to do is look around, read the paper, and see what's going on. And I've been doing this for 19 years, and we're very successful. And I know you want numbers and everything, and we'll get them, but I think we have a community that's pretty satisfied and happy with what we do. But we'll do what we have to do.
We're one of the most smallest departments, but we're the most visible. And for what these guys do with what they have, I think it's incredible. I really do.
Well, this is a great opportunity and a platform for you to come in and make a 15-minute presentation about the number of satisfied citizens there are and all the programs that exist, and for us to say, great job, what do you want money for next year? What are your long-term plans? You know, what can we help you with? This is a great opportunity for you to come in and say, you're looking at an override budget, potentially. We would love to be involved because we have these ideas. Phil?
Yeah, I don't think you should feel bad about providing these numbers, because I think what the numbers may show is that you're not sufficiently funded, given the value you provide to the community and to the children of this community. But I think we need the metrics so that we can understand these things and help make the case or not make the case, depending on what the figures show. You know, we ask a lot of the kids in this town. Schools charge fees for all the things that they do, and they're paying a lot of fees for the athletics that they enjoy through your department. And it would be interesting to look at a comparison of how much this community expends to allow its young people to engage in both school and non-school activities like this compared to other towns. And it's been a little bit difficult because we need to keep your revolving funds that are fees for service separate from some of the other things that you do, and to be able to do that in a really clear way.
We have those numbers, and we have we kind of keep them on a pretty regular basis, so Paul DeMano has it, we work with him. We can put that together. There's a snapshot of pretty much every program, so we know we can get that number on who's using it. The cost is going to be all over the board because there's different prices at different things. But yeah, I mean, we can provide everything that we do in the numbers.
Great, thank you. Ted?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that being able to clean up some of the accounting
Right.
will really help us get a better picture of, you know, on a comparative basis from year to year of what's going on. So I look forward to that. And I guess we should have asked you to bring in some more numbers before you got here, but this is a great start.
And
sorry.
I just, Ted's worked real close with us the last couple of weeks to try to make some good suggestions on the accounting end of it, which is gonna make our lives easier. So I just, he brought some good ideas and we're gonna implement them, so, and I just wanna publicly say thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Ted.
You bet.
Steve?
Yeah, and this may be more to you than Dave, because he takes his direction from the board, but as different departments have come in, we've asked them about how do they look at opportunities to have like consolidated services. Is there opportunity for parks to help with any of the lawn cutting, or for you guys to be helping with them, or you to be helping with cemetery, or them with you? Is it something that you guys look at regularly and try to find places where the town might be able to save some money?
Well, we help out with the police station. We mow that. I don't know.
Yeah, in the wintertime, there's probably not that much field maintenance that you can do with it when everything's dormant. You know, is there opportunity
Except
for
for
that?
Great.
I'm pretty busy
wrong
with this
day.
weather. It's the first time,
Short.
I don't think I'm gonna get the question, what do you do in the winter?
Yeah.
Short sleeve mowing today, right?
But we're pretty busy. We do help, we have, our guys work regular routes plowing for the town, especially last year, and so far this year, they've got minor ones, let's keep it that way. We have we utilize the DPW, have a good working relationship with them when we don't have the ability to do trees. So we'll share services with that, and they'll come in and help us. And you know, we're there whenever asked, whether it be schools or whatever, but it's kind of hard for us to extend any more, because with 3 guys and 115 acres, just don't have the personnel. It's more equipment sometimes, like we share a tree shredder, whatever they call it, I'm drawing a blank here, but we purchased it together years ago.
Chipper.
Chipper, there you go.
Tree shredder.
And we share that. DPW allows my guys, my foreman is very good with equipment. We'll borrow a Bobcat front-end loader, and we'll utilize that. When they ask us to help, like I said, we'll plow, we'll do different things. Same with the schools.
Anything with the cemetery, since someday it'll be a park?
You know, I have a good relationship, and good working relationship with Trees, but again, it's more equipment. We'll utilize their facility when we need to get rid of our leaves. They have an area where we can dump them. Or they'll store a container and we'll dump them in there. Is there ways to be creative down the road? Probably. If you really, but again, we're just trying to keep our heads above water, not just money-wise, but personnel-wise. And so it's kind
No,
of.
I get, strategically, you gotta make do it, that's why I was
Yeah.
asking Kevin if because it's more of a
Yeah.
board discussion,
But
really.
we think about those things. We tried something with the schools a few years ago where we took a couple of our seasonals, before we took the PS, we were cutting some of the grass around the schools, and it got into there was maintenance, repairs that had to be made, there was a little bit of a back and forth on who was gonna cover them, and that deal just went. But there's ways of doing it, probably down the road.
Thanks.
Thanks. Good question. Other questions?
Oh, I just,
Jean?
Ladies first.
there isn't any opportunity for any state reimbursement or for all that you do for these programs?
No, not really for the programs. You know, we rebuilt the path at Turner's Pond with state funds and a large grant from a community foundation. So those type of things come up once in a while. One of my suggestions to the playground planners was to look at grants dealing with the consultant that I had recommended. So that's an area that they might be able to look at, but not for really what, there was, probably about 20 years ago, right after they built the playgrounds, I believe, Kelly Field was rebuilt with some federal money. Since then it's been rebuilt, but it was rebuilt with federal money. There was Steve Morash, Steve Cannon, and that was my first involvement with the parks. I was on that committee, and we redid that. But other than that, not for our regular everyday stuff. One of the things we do is the MISAC, Milton Youth Sports Advisory Committee. And what that is, it's, in 2001, I know some of you have heard this story, but I'll go through it. In 2001, came to the realization there was no capital money, and the fields were in real bad shape. So we got all the leagues together, the youth leagues who used the fields, and we got them in a room, we talked about there's no money, what can we do? We were charging them like $150, $200 a field rental. So our income was roughly $3,000 to $5,000 a year from rental for these youth leagues to use our fields. And we really couldn't do anything with that money, it just wasn't enough. So they weren't getting a bang for their little buck they were given, and we couldn't maintain. So we sat in a room and we agreed that they would give us $10 per registration that they take. It would go into a fund, it would go into the rental revolving, and we would spend that money on capital items every year. We have invested well over $300,000, probably closer to $350,000 in all those years from that money into capital expenses. We just rebuilt the infield at the Little League field at Guile, the one with the fence, Piatelli, and we rebuilt the girls softball field this past year with those funds. Our commitment to them was that when the money comes in, we would spend it and put it on the fields and redo. We've put irrigation in, we've rebuilt fields, infields, you name it, we've done it, a lot of projects. Mary C. Lane's been rebuilt. So that's been really our lifesaver on a yearly basis to try to just maintain some of these facilities. But And that helps towards some of the turf maintenance costs that we have too. Our turf maintenance costs are well over $40,000 a year now, just to aerate, slice seed, and do all of that. So, but MISAC's been a very big part of us being able to at least maintain and stay up. Their only thing to us was that if we're gonna give you the money, we want it put into the fields, because our kids, that's where they are. So we get about $25,000 to $28,000 a year, depending on their registrations. We rely on them to be truthful to us, send us the check. I don't go out and ask them to check it. It's been really a lifesaver for us. It's maintained a lot of places, so.
Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, Dave, you'd mentioned that you were short of fields and that you were
Yes.
getting some, Milton Academy donated a field.
Milton Academy, we, in the spring now, I'll send a request out to Milton Academy, ask for certain lacrosse fields, and they will give us some field space.
So what would you estimate the value of that donation at?
Invaluable when it comes to the fact that these kids have nowhere to go. As far as a dollar cost, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't put a cost on it. I really wouldn't, because we didn't have them.
I was thinking 3,000 to 5,000 because of the other story you were telling, but to answer Gene,
Yeah.
if you were to put a dollar cost on it. It's kind of like, at some point, we should figure out like what Milton Academy is giving us and what we might want to ask them to pay in lieu of taxes, and this might be one thing that they're doing for us. And
They
just-
give us lacrosse, soccer, baseball.
And saying incalculable is probably not going with this
Certainly,
question.
there are rental fees that, you know, if we were to use a private field or something, we could check the pricing.
Yeah,
and
we
something like
could
that.
check that, but,
Okay.
yeah, we could get that.
I'm in the talking chair tonight, so no further questions.
You have to pass it to Phil now, he has a question.
Does, have you worked with Curry about any fields?
Curry's been pretty good. I have a relationship there, so.
So you use some Curry fields?
Usually when we ask, we can get it. They have an issue right now with the noise, those of you who are familiar with it. So they've curtailed a little bit of that at night when some of the youth groups would get the fields, especially at that end of the athletic facility. But, you know, soccer, when they've needed something, the high school goes and plays a couple of games there each year. They're allowed to go up there and do it, they work with them. It's just, again, they're limited too. It's more in the summer. We ran a clinic, a basketball clinic up there last year over break because they weren't around, so we were able to get in there and do that. So they've been very good to us.
Do they charge you?
No,
Okay.
absolutely. Milton Academy doesn't charge us either for the facility usage.
I think that's it, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's chat about special town meeting for a minute, because it's next week. I have some work to do to write a comment for the citizens petition, and I think my secretary will have some work to do to proofread my comment, make sure it's fair and balanced and grammatically correct and everything. Good night, guys. And then I need to review a PowerPoint presentation that Julia sent over for the slides that will be projected up on the screen. We are going to be meeting next week on Monday at 7 p.m. in the Teachers Lounge at the high school to have a pre-special town meeting. And is there anything else that we need to do in order to prepare for that meeting, or any other questions? Yeah, Steve?
Betty, you have to make us some cookies.
Okay, I think I can do that.
Cookies, officially requested. Ted, is there anything
Special
else that
town
we
meeting
need to
cookies.
prepare besides the comment, which Julia will print up on a colored paper, and the recommendation for the citizens petition?
Well, the warrant committee meets on Thursday morning or sometime before town meeting with town council, town administrator, and somebody from the Board of Selectmen, usually the chair, just to kind of run through the articles and go, oh, are there any issues? Are there,
Right.
you know, what do we expect here?
Ted and I are going to that
How many
meeting.
nights? You know, how many nights will this turn into? You know, that
One.
kind of thing. And you know, if some issue, sometimes an issue might come out of that, somebody will say, oh, you know, you really ought to revote this recommendation because we have to insert this or that or the other thing. And so there might, you know, we might possibly have a revote of a recommendation right before town meeting. And then there's a flurry for green handouts, you know. But so, you know, something might turn up then, but I don't see anything.
So for right now, nothing else that you folks need to do other than show up at 7 p.m. on Monday. And then I want to turn our attention to annual town meeting for a few minutes. I'm stalling a little bit on discussing contingent and non-contingent budget numbers because it is the failing of a bunch of folks in town that we want to get on the other side of special town meeting before we really start talking about a lot of specifics so that we see what happens, especially with the stormwater fund. So we're going to get a lot more specific. Right now, Ted has done a great job of keeping his spreadsheet up to date, so he has a pretty good picture right now of what things look like with or without a potential stormwater scenario in there. Of course, we don't know what the final number is yet, but we can be ready to discuss that with the committee fairly quickly as soon as we get on the other side of special town meeting. I emailed out to you yesterday, I think, the non-financial articles that will be on the annual town meeting warrant. There's some interesting ones on there, including a citizen's petition for the playgrounds and some stuff from the planning board. I'm going to have to get busy scheduling those people in fairly quickly because we're only going to have a couple of meetings, somewhat due to my travel schedule, sorry. We're only going to have a couple of meetings between special town meeting and when the warrant is due to go at the end of March. So we're going to schedule those presenters in pretty quickly so that we can get those folks in here and hear from the different constituents who are impacted by those articles so that we can start voting on the budget and voting on the non-financial articles as well. Any questions on what was sent out in that email or preparations right now for annual town meeting? So to cover the schedule again, we're not having a meeting on Wednesday of this week. Next week we have special town meeting on Monday, and we're going to meet at 7 p.m. in advance of the 7:30 special town meeting. I'm hoping that that is a one-night meeting, but even if it isn't, we're not meeting Wednesday next week. The week after that, Monday's a holiday. But on Wednesday, the 17th, we'll be in here with Joe Lynch, and we'll be talking about the budget scenarios at that point, and potentially some of the non-financial articles as well. Yes, Ted?
Oh, and if any of us have questions about the DPW budget, we ought to direct them to Steve, so that we can give Joe a heads up on those questions.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
Great.